everybody, welcome to another reaction live stream where I'm going to be answering your genealogy and DNA test questions. I am Jarrett Ross, the Genie Vlogger, and welcome to another stream. I know I'm starting these streams kind of all different times and stuff, just trying different things out, but also, figuring it out with my own life stuff. So welcome everybody. I do see we've got kind of a smaller crowd than usual today, but maybe it'll grow. But either way, I see a lot of familiar names. So welcome. We've got Callum coming in from Edinburgh, or I think the pronunciation is Edinburgh or something like that. I don't know my American pronunciation. Karma coming in from Nebraska. Alexandra coming in from Germany. Actually, unexpected live stream on Tuesday. Start expecting these more because now the plan will be I'm going to be doing 2 streams a week. 1 stream on the reaction channel, 1 stream on the main channel. All streams will be going through Twitch and all streams will be going through Facebook. So if you're watching through one of Facebook or Twitch, they'll all be there as well. Speaking of which, if anyone's on Twitch or if anyone has a Twitch profile but you're watching elsewhere, go on Twitch, follow me, help me out. Really need to build there. But yeah, so we'll be doing 2 live streams a week. It'll be, I think, Tuesdays around 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern time, that is. And then the main channel ones will be Fridays. Speaking of main channel ones, I have the poll up right now to decide who is going to be the family tree focus for Friday's live stream. It's going to be between Elon Musk, Mark Cuban, Barbara Corcoran, and Britney Spears. So last I looked, I think Britney Spears was taking the lead. I think she's been in the lead since the beginning, but be sure to go and vote on that for Friday. We've got Charlie here. Evening, Charlie, our wonderful mod. We have Stig here again from Oslo. I remember that because I made that joke. Are you the Stig or just Stig? Irene, a family friend of mine, still in North Carolina, as expected. We have Hugo Valentin in New York. Is it Valentin or Valentine? Always interesting to see the variations on surnames. Tin Plate Geek 2 coming in from Buckinghamshire, England. Then we also have, Charlie's coming in from Hampshire. We have Camilla coming in from Storfasna, Norway. I feel like you've said Norway before, but you haven't said where. So very interesting to see where. We have Kirsten coming in from Helsingborg, Sweden. We have my mom coming in from the USA. We have, Callan, Edinburgh, basically. Edinburgh. That sounds very much like my Discord. My Discord is definitely taken on a lot of younger genealogists, and it's very, very different conversations between young genealogists and older genealogists. And I feel like I hear bruh and blood a lot in there. So, yeah. Maven's here, just finished working out. Oh, good. Always good to work out. I did a little bit of a workout before the stream, actually. Daniel coming in from Bristol. We have the Grim Hild from Katowice, Poland. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly, but I feel like I was close. Katowice. And Valentin. Okay, so it is Valentin, not Tyne. And then we have Harlow Monroe coming in from Neckisha, New York. Interesting. And then we have Raul here. So welcome, everybody. I've said a whole lot of hellos, but let's jump on over to the questions. And as usual, just to kind of catch everybody up, if you aren't familiar with how we do the stream, I'll be answering questions from the Reddit. I always go by the questions that, let's see if I can get this to look nice. That looks a little bit better. I usually go by the questions that are at the top of trending. So if you're ever on the subreddit and you see questions that you think would be good to be answered on the live stream, upvote them because upvoting helps make them onto the live stream. As well, if you do ask questions in chat, I will try to get to them. We have kind of a light crowd today, so I imagine it might not be too hard to get to all the questions, but I can't guarantee it. But I do guarantee if you do one of those super chats or super stickers or whatever it's called and you have a question with that, I guarantee I'll answer those. But other than that, let's go ahead and jump on in. And I'd actually kind of peeked. I've started to peek a bit earlier before starting the stream. So doing the top of all time, I saw that question. I'm a Chinese-Indonesian, and I had been told that I'm 100% Chinese all my life, before taking DNA tests. And this one's actually from a year ago, and it hadn't been answered yet. And it's fairly interesting because this person takes multiple DNA tests. So let me make sure that I just want to make I have my own screen pulled up where I can kind of see where everything is, and I always just want to make sure that it's readable for those who can. I do see Katowice. Interesting. All right. Oh, and then we also have Leor here. Very cool. All right. Hello, I am Leia. I am a 22-year-old Chinese-Indonesian who can trace my origins all the way back to southeastern China. And a few of my strong interests since childhood are history and genealogy. I'd always wondered where I am from, and that even though I was told my parents that I am 100% Chinese, that only made me skeptical about their claims about my heritage. It was not until I heard about Genghis Khan and his rumored 16 million male descendants in high school that I started to become very interested in DNA testing, which I think they're referencing the you can kind of call it a rumor, although I think based on mathematics, it probably is not too far from likely, if not the truth, is that basically everyone who has any sort of Asian ancestry descends from Genghis Khan, most likely because he had so many children all over where he conquered. So I don't know how true that is. It's not something I've ever really looked into, but just something I know I've heard, and I imagine others have heard. If anyone knows in chat a bit more about it, definitely let us know. But anyway, however, we as a family do not have enough money, and I certainly did not have a job yet. Oh yeah, they were interested in DNA testing. It was only in this year that I am able to buy 2 DNA tests, one from MyHeritage and another from from Ancestry, and import my results to Weegene and True Ancestry. Here are my results from MyHeritage. So MyHeritage are getting 95.5% Chinese and Vietnamese, 4.5% Japanese and Korean. Not surprised by the fact that I'm mostly Chinese, but I do wish that they were more specific about where I am from. Also, the Japanese and Korean part had me speculating for quite some time on whether I had Korean, Japanese, or both in me. On a side note, though, I was kind of disappointed that I do not have either Indonesian or Mongolian ancestry in me. So before we keep going, I should start right here and just say, this is one of the things that I feel a lot of people get annoyed about when they take the DNA test if they haven't researched really in depth. I mean, you can take some time and research these and still not kind of realize that it's not going to be that specific. And so, I do wish that they were more specific about where I am from. I think all of us wish that the ethnicity admixtures were way more specific and actually reliable in that specificness. But that's the problem, is the more specific that you become, the less reliable that it is. And so that's why sites that do very, very granular breakdowns of DNA results, especially on or not especially for the ethnicity admixture, then that's something that, that has a lower confidence. There's a lot more questionability, so the more granular you get. So the other thing is that with a lot of these, I guess the best way to call them is Western DNA kits in a sense, but mostly like the DNA tests that are typical among the English-speaking population, which is basically Ancestry, MyHeritage, 23andMe, and Family Tree DNA. And then you can kind of throw Living DNA there now. They're kind of getting a lot bigger and more well-known. But with those, my understanding is that they just haven't had enough testing, and they haven't had enough results from actual studies about Asian populations and the genetics there, that for a lot of different parts of Asia, they can't get granular because they just don't have enough data and testing. And then that's where it's going to be interesting in the fact that this person's taken Weegene, because Weegene is an Asian-based DNA test, which similar to other Asian-based DNA tests, which, hold on one second, I just realized I had my mic a little far away. Hopefully that didn't sound terrible, and hopefully now I sound better. But anyway, there's tests like Weegene, 23andMe. I think Circle DNA might be based in Asia, but I can't remember for sure. And then there's maybe a few others, but part of their admixture is that, or part of the push in their marketing for their admixtures is that they're based in Asia. They have way more Asian studies and testing done, and because of that, they can give a more granular breakdown. So continuing on, here are the results from Ancestry. So we have Central and Eastern China, 94%, Southern China at 4%, with Eastern China and Southeast Asia coming in as a community, and then 2% Korea. So it's definitely coming in similar. Both tests are getting this Chinese, Chinese Vietnamese for MyHeritage, and then for Ancestry, they're just calling it Central and Eastern China, and then Southern China, which I guess the Southern China would be more along the Vietnamese lines, I would think. But with the Korean, both 2% and 4.5%, that certainly gives some sway of, is there something truly there? There's just the question is it actually Japanese or Korean, or could it possibly actually be the Indonesian? I know Indonesia is kind of right down over this way, and I'm not the most familiar with the history of Indonesia. The most I know about it is that as a Dutch colony, and the Spice Islands there, and that sort of thing, but I don't know about population flows and all of that. So I don't know, is Indonesia more tied with Chinese population groups, or is it more tied with Vietnamese or Korean or Japanese or something else? So I'll kind of keep my eye on chat a bit more than I usually do to see if I can see anything. Let's see, going through it. Actually, okay, Charlie, please join the subreddit if you haven't already. There's the subreddit for those who are not familiar with it. But then going through, Maven said Genghis Khan is a bit before what DNA tests would show, regardless, for most people who do descend from him. Very, very true. Very, very true. So yeah. So there wouldn't be much reason to expect 1/1,000,000th step to show or whatever. Yeah. Harlow Monroe, according to MyHeritage, I have Japanese Korean DNA, but when I uploaded the Genome Link, I have Ancestry all over Asian. I'm trying to figure that out. Yeah, Genome Link isn't one that I'm very familiar with because their data isn't really genealogically geared. From what I remember, I'd have to look again. And I know I check all of these third-party sites and other DNA testing companies, and I know that Matt Baker from Useful Charts has done multiple videos on them. And if I just don't see any genealogical usefulness to it, I usually kind of don't mess with those sites, so I don't really know much about them either, because I'm more focused on building off of the stuff that I know will have, or at least have a high confidence they'll have some sort of genealogical usefulness. Also, Korea doesn't allow DNA testing like France, so Korean DNA is a bit of a guess. Yeah, that is true. I mean, I don't know if you mean South Korea and North Korea. I'm assuming North Korea, obviously. But there are people outside of Korea that have Korean ancestry, but then that doesn't necessarily always tell us the most. And yeah, that's going to definitely take a lot away. So that's something interesting to know. But if you know if it's South Korea too, let me know. Callum says Circle DNA is based in Hong Kong. So very interesting. And then for MyHeritage, they group Filipino, Indonesian, and Malay together. So, okay. So yeah, kind of that sort of Southern Asian islands, or yeah. And then Harlow said GEDmatch also gives me ancestry all over Asia as well. The GEDmatch calculators, those ones are, I like to call it pick your own ancestry, because you can run it. They have 3, 4, 5 dozen different admixture calculators you can run them through, and they'll all give you all sorts of variations of things. And some of them are very out of date. Some of them probably shouldn't even really be up and available because they're so misleading. But honestly, especially with Asian readings, you could go through, do all those tests, and you'll find all sorts of little bits of Asian, no matter what sort of ancestry you get, just because, especially the way some of them define the different Asian groups. So, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't buy too much into all that stuff. Okay, South Korea doesn't allow connecting DNA tests due to privacy like France. North Korea doesn't believe in DNA for all I know. Well, yeah, North Korea, I'm guessing, is completely outside of that. But yeah, South Korea doesn't allow connecting DNA tests due to privacy like France. Yeah, interesting. Okay, let's continue back on to the question. So I'm quite pleased that Ancestry is being more specific of where I'm from, and that my connection with the Eastern China and Southeast Asia community is spot on, as I was born in Indonesia and raised in a Chinese-Indonesian family. I also got to know that it turned out that I had Korean and no Japanese in me. However, that made me curious as to how my Korean third or fourth great grandparent got on with my Chinese ancestors. here's the breakdown of my ethnicity inheritance. And so here's what's known as the side view, where it's giving parent 1, parent 2. So they're saying, okay, well, here's what you're inheriting from one parent, and here's what you're inheriting from another parent. Hold on, I need to blow my nose. All right. It's getting cold over here. All right. I inherited my Korean ancestry from only one of my parents based on the side view. But the thing with side view is that it certainly has a decent confidence to it from what I've heard from a lot of people, but experiencing it through endogamous population groups, which is most of the work I do, I've come to not rely on side view very much, or at least to take it with a bit of a grain of salt, very similar to an ethnicity admixture in general, in that, okay, it could give me an idea that, yeah, maybe this Korean is coming from one parent, and that probably is likely with how it's coming in, but it's just something where it's like, we can't read all of this and say, okay, no matter what, it's definitely coming from one parent. What we should say is, based on the information we're seeing, most likely it is coming from one parent. So, they say here, I inherited my Korean ancestry from only one parent, from one of my parents. I would say they most likely inherited. So most likely being the key part there. So then with gene results, now this is where it's going to get really interesting. We can see how it is much more nuanced, much more granular, granted, not super more, but yeah. So Chinese, Southern Han Chinese, 57.01%, Northern Han Chinese, 38.24%, Hmong-Mien, I'm sure I'm pronouncing that terribly, I'm sorry, but 0.85%, others 0.02%, and then Northeast Asian 3.85%, with it coming in Japanese 3.84 and this 0.01. And so this time, instead of Korean, I have Japanese blood, which really confused me. So I think the part of the thing here too is, we see with my heritage, they're lumping Japanese and Korean together. Here, they're just creating Korean as its own thing for Ancestry. And then here they're having Japanese as its own thing. And I presume Gene probably has a Korean reading as well, but that's something we'd have to look into and see, because maybe they don't and they just call it Japanese, but really they should call it Japanese and Korean, or, that's how these are sometimes, is they just kind of lump groups together, but they just call it one big population group. And part of it is maybe the difficulty of reading that DNA. So another great example for Europe, French and German. You'll often see French and German lumped together. And even funnier, something kind of similar too, is you'll often see East Asian and Native American lumped together. So this time, instead of Korean, I have Japanese blood, which really confused me. Now we get into the My True Ancestry results. With My True Ancestry, is kind of like that genome link that someone was asking about before. It's one of those sites that I personally have never really done much with, because I didn't see any genealogical usefulness to it, so I didn't really want to put any time into it. So, it does have interesting results from what people have shown me with My True Ancestry, but my understanding is this is much more of how does your DNA link up to ancient samples, which is interesting, but not genealogically useful. So here they even say ancient sample breakdown. We see large majority Han Dynasty. Then, I'm sorry, people, I'm going to be terrible pronouncing this. It's just going to be how it is. Lakhavi Kingdom, Tokugawa Shogunate, Three Kingdoms of Korea, Paiyu Kingdoms, the Golden Horde, Jaman, Yayo, and then Ancient Deep Dive Breakdown, Han Dynasty, Lukavi Kingdom, Tokugashi Shogunate, Three Kingdoms of Korea, and Pyu Kingdoms. So deep dive, most likely to be my ancestors, as they and I have both shared the same DNA segments. Okay. And a bit of both Asian history and family history talks here. So my second great-grandparents and great-grandparents born around 1890s and 1920s were the first people in my family to have immigrated to Indonesia. So this is making a lot of sense why they wouldn't get Indonesian, because this would be like my family moving to France 200 years ago, or yeah, even better, my family actually did move to England 200, or when in the 1860s, 1861, 1862, my family moved from Amsterdam to London. And then my family then moved to the United States in the 1890s. So even though my family lived in England, I'm not going to get any English DNA because of that. So same thing here. If they had ancestors that moved to Indonesia and then moved out, or even if they moved to Indonesia and you still live there, unless you have actual Indonesian ancestry, if you just have Chinese Chinese ancestors who migrated to Indonesia as your ancestry, then it definitely makes sense you wouldn't get any Indonesian. Let's continue though. In which they were part of the second wave of Chinese immigrants to Indonesia, 1850s and 1930s. Ethnicity-wise, I've been told that all of my recent ancestors, at least, are all Chinese. Both of my grandfathers are both from the Hoklo. I called them the Hokkien people group, which originated from the Chinese province of Fujian and its surrounding provinces and municipalities, which... okay, yeah. Meanwhile, my maternal grandmother's paternal clan is the Hakka. I call them K, which is from southern part of China, like Guangdong and Fujian. And it was my paternal grandmother that was different from the rest, as she came from the Shandong province, which is a bit more northeastern than Fujian and Guangdong. I'm trying my best, people. I know. I'm sorry for the pronunciation. The closer proximity of Shandong province to Korea and Japan makes me theorize that I might have gotten my Korean and Japanese ancestry through my paternal grandmother, although I still do not have any hard evidence about that being true. If you are able to explain why I have a bit of Korean and Japanese ancestry in me, I would be more than grateful for that. Otherwise, thank you for reading this. This was a long one to read all of it, but I think it was kind of important and interesting because we got to see a lot of things. Too long, didn't read. I am a Chinese-Indonesian who is more than curious to know where her Korean and Japanese ancestry came from. So I think I've kind of answered the first part of this in a sense of, why are they getting a mixture of some saying Japan, some saying Korean, some saying kind of a mixture. And then even with the my true ancestry kind of giving, it seems like mostly Chinese, but then stuff in Japan and stuff in Korea. And then I don't know if all of, where some of this other stuff may be coming from, if it's outside of that, but it certainly makes sense that they're not quite certain how to match that up with whether it's Korean or Japanese. Now, the thing that we do notice is that it seems to be a range of about 2% to 4% or so with the reading of the Korean, possibly Japanese. And so looking at our fun little banner, let's go ahead and put that up that we usually have, is the breakdown of what we expect for those ancestors. So if you see at the bottom of the screen now, we have that breakdown. And so once you get down to that 3 point whatever percent for third great grandparents, that's kind of where we're looking, because we're already looking at that 2 to 4% range. So the way to think of it is that there's a few ways it could go. It could be that you just inherited a low amount from a more recent ancestor. So it could be a second great grandparent where you usually expect 6.25%, or it could even be as distant as a fourth great grandparent where you usually get 1.56%, but you just happen to inherit more. And so you get these higher readings of the 3 point whatever percentage. So that's the first thing, is we're breaking down where is this ancestor, assuming all of this DNA, all of this Japanese/Korean DNA is coming from one recent ancestor. So we're looking at that. That means we need to build out every single line out to the second, third, and fourth great grandparents, presumably. And so technically the way that you can do it is, go through all of your second great grandparents and see, are any of them coming in where you could identify a possible Japanese or Korean ancestor? If not, then go to the next generation and then the next. And the difficulty becomes, if you can't get that far back, then sometimes you may get readings like this where, in my opinion, having seen a good amount of Asian readings, something like this certainly gives me sway to think that, yeah, you probably do have a somewhat recent Japanese or Korean ancestor that is probably a second, third, fourth, maybe even a fifth great grandparent. And it is certainly possible that maybe you do have multiple, but it'd still be kind of more of on that distant, not super close. So, maybe a second great grandparent or third great grandparent, but more than likely third, fourth, or fifth great grandparents, but multiple of them, or even more distant. So, lots of things to consider there. So in terms of figuring out where it is on your family line, you can do this in a few ways. Number one, identify all the DNA matches you have, and you're on on Ancestry and MyHeritage, which gives a lot of matches for you. But in terms of the matches that are actually in Asia, that's where you're going to run into the actual difficulty, because I think both of those sites have very low amounts of people that are actually in Asia. I don't know if WeGene does DNA matching. If it doesn't, maybe looking at 23 Mafong as well, because both of those sites, or both of those DNA tests being in Asia, and then Circle DNA as well, they do have DNA matching as part of it, which I really need to learn more about the Asian-based DNA tests, especially with talking about them so much. But if you do know that that's a part of it, definitely look there too. But what you want to do is, more than anything, find the matches that you already know how they're related and look at their ethnicity admixtures. And if this is truly coming from one recent ancestor, whoever that ancestor is, the other descendants of that ancestor will likely be having similar amounts of that Japanese Korean for you. So if you look at a bunch of your cousins, you notice that one group of your cousins, they're all getting these similar Japanese Korean readings, but another group aren't, you're going to be leaning towards that one group that are also getting those readings. As well, what you can do, although this might be even harder with the low amount of matches and the difficulty of just reading admixtures in general for Asian populations, is looking at your matches to find the matches that have very little Chinese ancestry and instead have mostly Japanese and or Korean, but it doesn't have to be, all Japanese or Korean. If you find someone where they have 50% Japanese and Korean and 50% European, they're going to be a perfect person because that they have no Chinese reading. And so there's a possibility that their relation is only going to be through your Japanese relation. So a lot of ways to go about it. So hopefully that's helpful. After talking so long, let me go and check chat. Let me see what's going on with chat. I see a lot of stuff in here, and I even see a super chat. So we'll definitely get to the super chat. Let's see. South Korea not allowing DNA tests makes sense. Why my dad has like 500 matches. So Cataly, coming from South Korean ancestry, not getting many matches. But question from Raul: how near is a relative 1.3%? So that's 91.6 centimorgans. And then I'm guessing the 9.2 centimorgan, is that the longest segment? I'm going to answer that, but I'm going to just check the chat stuff first, see if there's anything related to Chinese thing right now, but we will get to your question in a second. You talked about Asian DNA testing, but what would be the best for the Middle East? Asking is a Moroccan Iraqi Jew who want to go further back to family's history since records of history go less back. Yeah, now for Moroccan Jewish ancestry, I will say that there is some good stuff going on right now. And I have worked with a few researchers who specialize in Moroccan ancestry, specifically Raquel Leve Toledano and Jacob Marache. Marash, I think is probably the proper way to pronounce it, but both of them are amazing researchers. I actually just spent a lot of time with them in London. We actually went and had a little Sephardic lunch together and a couple of meetings, and we hung out a bunch. It was really cool. But there's a lot of movement in at least the Moroccan Jewish records. For the Iraqi Jewish records, that's a whole different ballpark. But in terms of DNA testing, I would honestly suggest, I think the best suggestion would be you want to be on MyHeritage for sure, because MyHeritage seems to have the largest non-English speaking world database for the typical English speaking DNA tests. And there's a lot of DNA testers from Israel in MyHeritage. Even though Israel doesn't allow DNA testing, people in Israel are still able to do DNA testing in different ways by testing outside of Israel and all that. So MyHeritage, you definitely want to be in. I would also highly suggest getting into Ancestry DNA. That might be the one that you probably want to actually take the test with, and then you can upload to MyHeritage. Although taking the test through MyHeritage as well, there is a little bit of a benefit in that they're testing a lot of DNA markers that Ancestry does not test. And then Ancestry tests a lot of DNA markers that MyHeritage doesn't read. So if you do the test through MyHeritage, they can utilize a lot more DNA markers in giving you the results. But more than anything, I mean, if you're looking for relatives, which is the way to, or genetic matches, which is the way to really use these DNA tests to get back, which we're going to get into this question from Raul in showing kind of how to do that. Then, that's really where you go from there. And so the big thing is just casting as broad of a net as you possibly can. So the best route is to test with as many tests as you possibly can. But if there is that limitation, Ancestry and MyHeritage are two of the big ones I highly recommend. Family Tree DNA also has a really big Jewish population in their database. So coming from an Iraqi or Moroccan-Iraqi Jewish background, you may find a lot of that. So hopefully that was helpful. Let's see. Okay. Just kind of jumping through a few of these to see if there's anything coming up. Okay, thank you. Callum, WeGene does do matching, but you can only view them on the Chinese website, and also their database just isn't big enough for the matches to be worth looking into. Yeah, that's at least they do have the matching. Kind of sad that it's limited. Kind of understandable though, especially it being a Chinese website. I believe is WeGene the one based in China? I know one's based in Japan. There's one based in Japan and one based in China. I don't remember. Yeah, on the Chinese website. Okay. But even so, one thing I know that I heard sentiments like this when I first tested back in 2013 of people like, there's just not enough matches that, you just have, it's got to be luck. Times change. And I'm sure if their database does grow, it will become better. So if this is something you really want to get into and you really want to build into that Chinese ancestry and find those genetic matches, I'd still suggest testing there because as their database builds, you may find those matches, but very good to know. What time did the live stream start? 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard. I kind of had a late morning, so I was just kind of starting. Yeah. The ethnic is not so interesting for me, but finding relatives is quite interesting. I have cousins all over the world. 100% agree. 100% agree. In fact, 200% agree. I feel like people spend too much time on the ethnicity admixtures just because it's easy. It's very easily digestible, and to uncover the true ancestry, which I always like to say, your ethnicity admixture is like a blurry photo of your ancestry, but when you actually use your DNA matches to then expand your tree and build and get past where the paper trail cuts off, that's when you start to really make a clear picture and you can actually start to get the stories of your ancestry. So, yes. Okay, let's jump through because I want to get to Raul's question. I just want to make sure that I'm not missing anything in terms of the Asian heritage stuff. So, little thing from Maven: Japanese were always isolated but powerful, not much to be enslaved or forcefully moved. Even move willingly till around World War II. Okay, the data I wrote in Super Chat is from MyHeritage. Okay, so I'm guessing the end part of that was the longest segment. Okay. Even though you might not get matches in Asia, you might get matches from those whose ancestors have emigrated to parts of the world where tests are more available. Those with family trees are useful. Yes, definitely. And I think that's probably one of the difficulties for people that have more recent Asian ancestry or things like that, is the more recent your Asian ancestry is. And so especially if the person who posted this, our OP, is living in Indonesia still, then I think it's very possible that they're going to see very few matches because it's only going to be their more distant relatives that migrated, because presumably their more recent family all stayed, which is why they're there. And then Callum, 23 Mofong and WeGene are based in mainland China, and Gene Life is the one based in Japan. Gene Life's the one I always forget. That's the one I always forget. So, okay. So let's get to Raul's question, the super chat. And the best way to go about answering a question like this is using our favorite tool, the Shared Centimorgan Project by Blaine Bettinger, which is on the DNA Painter website by Johnny Pearl. So this is a amazing tool. Let's try to make this a little bit bigger. So Raul's question is, how near is a relative 1.3%, which is 91.6 centimorgans? And then this 9, 20 centimorgans, I think that's basically 9.2 is the longest segment. Now, seeing a result like this, I will say from experience, if longest segment here is 9.20, then it does put a little bit of a question of how reliable this match is, because that's a very low longest segment. But if this is actually reading the 9 is referencing the amount of segments, which that might be the case, it's saying 9 segments, and then your longest segment is 20 centimorgans, then much more confidence. But if it's 9.2 centimorgans, so you'll want to check that row. But if it is 9 segments across, or 9 segments with 20 centimorgans being the longest segment, confidence higher. But basically, for what we want to do here is we want to figure out how close is the relative, where are we likely going to find it, and then once we figure that out, well, how do we actually find them? So the first thing that we want to do, we want to put in 91.6. Now, if you are on a site like 23andMe, which gives you only percentages, or they give you more than percentages, I think, well, unless it's part of the stuff they took out from the website after the data leak, not much of a data leak, but 1.23% here. But, if you get that percentage instead, you can put it there. And now it's giving you this kind of breakdown of probability that it's each. So the relationship probability is based on stats from the DNA Geek. So basically, this is not using the same data as over here. This data here in this table is using the relationship probabilities based on the stats from the DNA Geek. These relationships are all based off of the Shared Centimorgan Project, which is all information sent in by people, where it literally asks, okay, what genetic matches do you have that you know exactly how you're related to them and then how much they're matching you? And then by taking thousands and thousands of pieces of data, which actually, let's see, is it here? So you can read more about it into how to get into it. But the thing that I want to find is Blaine Bettinger's actual. Oh, do not want that up. Blaine Bettinger's actual. Here we go. No, that's not it. Other versions, contribute data, more about this project. Here we go. Okay, I think this is what I've been looking for. So this is the full PDF of it. And this kind of goes through all of the, in a sense, this is the white paper, which actually, I wonder, is this the one? Yeah. So I was one of the people that got to review the information and basically kind of check everything and make sure there wasn't any issues or anything like that. But you can see there's a lot of really, really amazing genealogists in this list. Some names that probably stand out to some folks. I think probably one of the people that really stands out that did a lot of work in helping with this from my inside view is Randy. But a lot of people put a lot of work into this, but most especially Blaine Bettinger. And so here you can kind of see the number of people that are in each of the groups that are. No, these are the results, but there's somewhere it shows the number of people, and you just get into all of that. So, okay, just to give a background in places for if you really want to learn more about this, that's what you can do. But going back to this, what we're actually doing, so we have the 91.6, and so we get all of these different relationships. But the main thing that we want to do here is we want to kind of focus on the ones that are closer to the average. So the way to work this, in my opinion, is basically you want to work from the most likely hypothesis and work to try to first disprove that and then keep going. In terms of disproving it in this kind of sense, it's very difficult, but you always want to have that in the back of your mind of, is there a way that I can disprove this is the connection? So the way that we start it, though, we have 91.6 centimorgans. So what's the averages that are closest to that 91.6? And it's kind of falling halfway between these 122s and 70s. So you can see that there's a pattern here. 117, 122, 122, 117. So up 2 over 1, up 2 over 1, up 2 over 1. Then same thing here, 71, up 2 over 1, up 2 over 1, up 2 over 1. It would be 71. So it's not always exactly the same because they're using real world data, but it's always going to be very similar because with these relationship distances gives you the idea. So we're basically looking at a couple of different things here. So we've got basically second cousin once removed, second cousin twice removed, second cousin once removed, third cousin, first cousin 3 times removed, second cousin twice removed. So we have a lot of options. But the thing that we want to do now is we need to take into account ages. First off, how old are you? And then how old is your match if you can figure it out? Because at that point, if you can learn ages, then you can get a general idea of, are we looking at generational differences? Because that's going to then help us to determine what's our most likely hypothesis. So let's say that you find out that that person's the same age as you. Well, it doesn't necessarily mean they are going to be the same generation. We just take that assumption and push that towards the hypothesis to give us an idea of, okay, well, what is our strongest hypothesis using the age, but still understanding it could be a different generation. Well, if they're the same age as you, presumably they'd probably be about the same generation as you. So looking at the same generation, what's the thing that stands out as our most likely? Third cousin. Then we want to pull that up and look at our histogram and make sure that it's falling within something that makes sense. Obviously, it's going to make sense because it's going to be towards the average. So it's kind of right there. You can see where it's, fairly strong there. So that's going to be our most confident, most likely. But then we also want to go into the halves. So we also have a half second cousin. So with the halves, there's a few ways to go about it. For one, if it's a half second cousin, it means that you're not sharing a pair of great grandparents. It means you're sharing one great grandparent. And that grandparent had multiple children with different spouses. You descend from one of the spouses, they descend from one of the other spouses. So those are our 2 strongest hypotheses, half second cousin, third cousin. And so with a half second cousin, we're going to be looking at a great grandparent distance. With a third cousin, we're going to be looking at a great great grandparent distance. So what does this mean for us? Well, now we want to build our tree out to every we want to build our tree out to every great grandparent and second great grandparent. And then we want to build their tree out to every great grandparent and second great grandparent, because presumably, if we are correct in our hypothesis, they should be falling in line with having an ancestor around a shared ancestor around that time. So presumably, you should build that out and then find at least one person who is a shared ancestor, if not a pair of shared ancestors. And then what you have to do is keep going through that. And that's kind of the basic way of doing it, but there's a lot more that you can do with it. So one of the things that you can do with it is that you can do clustering. So the leads method is a great way of doing clustering. There's also auto clusters. So if you're on, I think you said MyHeritage, but if you're on MyHeritage or GEDmatch, trying to remember if anyone else does auto clustering. You can do auto clustering also through geneticaffairs.com if you're on Family Tree DNA, and maybe some other ones too. But auto clustering is created by a guy. What is his preferred way of? I never know if he likes EJ or saying his actual name, but I think he just prefers EJ. But he's based in the Netherlands, and he's been developing the auto cluster stuff. And we've actually been working on doing an auto cluster that works for, where is it? Where are you? Yeah, I guess just EJ. All right. But we've been working on an auto cluster specifically designed for endogamy. But anyway, don't want to get off the topic too much. But with auto clustering or the leads method, or if there's some other sort of clustering method that you've come up with or seen, clustering is basically just the concept of finding multiple different matches and then clustering them together. Basically, you're all sharing DNA with each other. So presumably you all are getting that DNA from the same ancestor. So if you can cluster this match with other matches, you can not only build this match's tree out, but then build out the trees of those other matches. And maybe you don't find a connection with this match between your tree, but then maybe you find a connection between that match's tree and the other match's trees. And so once you make that connection for them, then that gives you an idea of where in their tree you should figure out how you connect. So if you find matches and you find out that they're second cousins to each other, and you know the specific great grandparents that they share, well, you know now that it's going to be through that great grandparents' family of theirs. So instead of having to work with their entire trees, now you have one very specific branch of their shared tree to work on. Now you just have to figure out, how does your tree connect into that? So it's getting into a lot of the difficulty stuff, but that's kind of the basic ways of going about it, and some of the advanced stuff. So, I mean, this is the part of genetic genealogy where it takes kind of a long time of reading and learning and watching stuff and doing hands-on work with the matches to kind of get a feel of doing all of that. But I mean, there's a lot of stuff with doing this kind of work where you do a lot of research and you just may never find the answer, or it just might be just beyond your grasp, and it's going to take, a few years for another DNA match to come in or some new records to be digitized to finally get past it. So hopefully that helped answer your question. Hopefully that was very useful for a lot of other folks too, with this. So, okay, let's see. We have a lot of stuff coming in. I just want to go through and see if Raul said anything else in response to that yet. Nope. Okay. So let's go through some of these other ones down here. Where did I? Okay. Let's see. DNA Painter is probably my favorite non-DNA match providing site. Agree. There's a lot of amazing things with DNA Painter. For one, you can actually do your DNA painting, paint your DNA. So it's literally DNA painting is just, you have your chromosomes, and then you paint where on your chromosomes you're getting that DNA from using your DNA matches. So if you share DNA with a second cousin, then wherever you're sharing that DNA with that second cousin, presumably that DNA is coming from your shared ancestors. So that's kind of how you do it. So, but it's a great site. Let's keep going. I see a lot of talk about Aboriginals. Don't know much about Aboriginal ancestry or DNA testing. Gina Chen, welcome. Oh yeah, one thing I need to do is, now that we've answered Raul's question, I need to mark this as answered by also, this question was reviewed on this live stream. And as I said last time, I've been posting so many links doing this on the streams. I really hope Reddit doesn't ban me for doing that, because I don't know. Even on my own Reddit, but I know that I've heard other YouTubers, and I think Mr. Beat was one of them, where he was posting his own videos and stuff on his own Reddit, and then they blocked his account for spamming. Just, yeah. Okay, let me just double check through chat before we get to the next Reddit question. I want to know how I can use the several DNA tests to understand the mysteries of my family tree. Well, kind of like what I was just talking about with your DNA matches and, working to figure out how you're connected. It's just a lot of work and learning about researching. Well, I'm trying to think of a good way to put it, because it's kind of like, I mean, there's literally whole books on the subject of how to use DNA tests to understand your mysteries of your family tree. But the basic thing is using your DNA matches to help you get past your brick walls by overcoming where the paper trail just drops off. I mean, there's so many tricks and ticks and techniques to do that, and that's kind of why. There's a lot of great stuff out there. So, I don't even know where to begin answering that question. I mean, that's a huge series. It's a full week course to go into everything on that. I just wish Asian genealogy was easy to do as European genealogy. Yeah, well, I think even then it depends on what European genealogy you're doing, because there are some that are really difficult. But yeah, I think in general, it's so difficult for a lot of population groups to be able to get really good genealogy and family trees built, just because the lack of records or the lack of access to records, the destruction of records, and I mean, just all sorts of different things. So yeah, it would be nice to see the entire world have that sort of ability. Like for me, the gold standard of genealogy, one of the best, is the Netherlands, the Dutch genealogy, because for one, they have the laws that say that it's translated to the reuse of government information or something like that. But it's basically a law that says anything that the government makes, which is basically most genealogical records, civil records and things like that, if they're digitized, they have to be available online for free. And so with Dutch records, everything's available. And I so wish it was like that for everyone else, because their records go back to the 1500s and beyond, probably. Okay, let's see. Raul, thanks. You are welcome. I hope that was very helpful for you. Let's see. Especially back in the day, the generational differences could be huge. My grandfather's older brother was over 10 years older than him, and my grandfather was over 7 years older than his younger brother. Yeah. I mean, it definitely. I mean, in my own family, and I think I had a poll about this not too long ago of, how far out do you have to go to find relatives in your generation that are 20 years older or younger than you? And so for me, I have second cousins who are the exact same age as me, but they're second cousin, or not the same age as me, the exact same age as my dad. And so those second cousins on my dad's side, they're my generation, but way older than me. So, it's definitely, you can never trust that it's always going to be the same generation, but just in doing that work and trying to figure out how a DNA match is related to you, it's kind of going through those steps. So, let's say you look at it generation wise, and then as you start to build the trees out, it doesn't really make sense. And it seems like, okay, well, maybe it's not like that. Maybe instead of it being same generation, maybe it's one generation off. But the thing is if they are the same age as you, then your confidence of how far out that is going to get lower each drop. So, same generation of you, high confidence. One generation difference from you, up or down, pretty high confidence still. But then once you get to 2 generations above or down from you, especially if they're around that distance of a 90 centimorgan match, assuming it's not an endogamous population group, then you are dealing with something where it's like, okay, that kind of doesn't make sense then. The confidence is much lower that, you're going to have cousins that are 2 generations different from you and that are about a set, something like that, or that are your same age. Okay. Market answered. Thank you, Matt. I did, but big shout out to Matt being in here. I don't know if I missed your hello earlier, if you had one or not. Okay, let's keep going through. Jump in. Speaking of Matt, good point. Don't forget to join the Genie Vlogger Discord for banter and Genie chat all day, every day. That's the Discord link for anyone who isn't familiar. And I don't know if that Discord link comes up in Twitch and Facebook too. So if Matt or Charlie are here and they want to jump on over and do that for me, I'd appreciate it. But for those who don't know, my Discord is very active. One of the things that I've really aimed to do with my channel is to try to attract a much younger audience to genealogy and to really see how amazing genealogy can be. And my Discord is very much proof that I have succeeded in that, because the Discord is very, very much a Discord server that, it's not like your typical genealogy stuff, but it is very useful for genealogy. It's a lot of fun. And people help each other out all the time with all sorts of different ancestries. And we have a lot of people in the group with a lot of different expertises and interests and experience with all sorts of sites and ancestries and all of that. So, yeah. All right, let's keep going. Let's see. Actually, it's so cold out. It's so dry. I need to put chapstick on, which me being my soda loving person, which I have to try to avoid it so much, but I saw this at Big Lots and I had to get it. Mountain Dew soda. Like it's, that's barely coming in because it's all green, but you can kind of tell it's Mountain Dew. But like it was this whole pack of stuff. I thought it was funny. I was like, oh yeah, let me get that. So oh, whoa, where did I just knock down? Sorry for having to show everyone my bald head like that. Dropped something. I don't want my dogs to get it. Okay, let's keep answering questions. Yeah, Matt Potter says there is a way to extract your match list from Ancestry to a spreadsheet, which will come out as a .csv file, I believe. Then match lists together using an ID that's in the URL. I do this and you get more shared matches, less than 20 centimorgan for distant matches. Yeah, and it is very useful. And then I don't know if MyHeritage still allows it, but MyHeritage, you can download your match list, but you can also download your segment matching from MyHeritage. So if you do DNA painting, you can do one where you can look at all of your DNA and then look at all of your matches comparing. Actually, you know what? I wonder if I could actually show that on stream. Let's see, I'm going to pull it up on a different window and see if it's something that let's see, hopefully it'll there we go. Okay. Okay. So hopefully I don't accidentally show anything too crazy on this. But I think this will be very interesting. So this is the DNA painting that I have for my father. And so you can see here how it breaks down. Now, what I've done is, and I need to not hover too much over segments because it does say names of people. So got to be careful here. But what you can see is that it's breaking everything down in terms of, let's move this. And then what is it? Okay. So it's breaking things down where you can get, let's close that. Just realized you all couldn't really see that. But it's breaking things down, and I'm going to turn this. I like to have this overlay up, but you're just not going to be able to see everything otherwise. So you can break things down. You have all for your stuff, which I need to turn all that off. You have all, and then when you assign chromosomes, you can assign them to whether it's paternal and maternal. And then sometimes you might have ones where you're not quite sure how they are related. And so you can paint them in and do that to get an idea of where they are. But even more, what you can do is when you download those segments like I was talking about, then, so here's like the MyHeritage one. So it looks crazy, but then when you expand it, oh geez, that's a lot of names, but we're going to be careful with it. But then when you expand it, basically it puts in every single segment. It puts in every single segment and where they're matching you. And so then you can correlate that by looking, okay, where does it overlay with segments that I know? And even more, if you can figure out where recombination points are in your DNA, so like if you can do visual phasing, then you can use that even more to determine which side of the family it's on, because when you do visual phasing, you're identifying the correct recombination points in your DNA. And so if a recombination point on your mom's side is where a DNA match, let's say they have a segment going over that recombination point, that means that it's not going to be on your mom's side, because you would not expect to share DNA with that person unless they happen to have both the ancestors you're inheriting that from, because that recombination point means that your mom's DNA recombined. So part of that DNA is coming from her father and part of that DNA is coming from her mother. So if you're getting a DNA match that matches over where that recombination point is, that DNA match either has to match both your mom's mom and your mom's dad at exactly that same, which is such a low probability that'll happen. And more than likely what that means is, because it's going over that recombination point, that's going to be from your other side, your father's side of the family. So a lot of use that you can get out of this. So I think that's all I'm going to show for now. I think that was a little risky for me with all those names in there, but hopefully that was really interesting for a lot of people to see. And yeah, let's see. Okay. Yeah, the MyHeritage, the chromosome browser is back on MyHeritage. I think there is a little bit of limitations and stuff still, but I can't remember. But 23andMe, it's like you can't do anything. Let's see. Okay, I see a lot of people kind of chatting with each other, so let's jump into the next question. I see that we've just hit an hour of streaming, so I'm not going to do too many more questions, maybe one or two. A couple of things before I keep continuing, though. For those who don't know, I am also streaming on Twitch and Facebook, and I am really trying to build up there as well. So most especially if you're on Twitch, if you can jump on over there and follow me there and even chat a little bit in that chat group. I'm trying to build it, but don't, no obligations. Also, if you haven't liked, followed, subscribed, or whatever on whatever platform you're on, greatly appreciate that. And if you do have any questions, post them in chat. I will try to get to questions. Can't guarantee it. But if you do a super chat or super sticker with a question, I do guarantee I will answer those, which we did have one today, which was a great question that allowed me to talk about a lot of different stuff. So let's figure out what the next one we're going to be doing is. And I definitely want to avoid one of the ethnicity admixtures of why is it, why am I getting this and not that, which, kind of like this one, I guess. Let's see. And maybe we'll just answer this one quickly because there's not really much to it. Okay. My 23andMe results. Great grandmother was half Bahamian and half Spanish, which okay, it is from Bahamas. I was like, is that actually I don't know if I pronounced it correctly, but okay. Okay. The Native American wasn't expected, although with the Bahamian, I think I would, depending on your ancestry there. I don't really know a whole lot about the history of the Bahamas and population groups and such, but assuming that it's somewhat similar to other areas in the Caribbean, I would think that Native would not be uncommon. The Native American wasn't expected. Not sure if it's noise because my mom also had trace Native in her results as well. Okay, getting calls from random numbers. Oh, yeah, okay. So let's see. So we have European, Northwestern European, 92.7%, British Irish, 82.9%, although they said they were just talking about the great grandmother. They didn't talk about the entire ancestry. So that it makes even more sense too if it's such a small amount. But okay, Northwestern European, 92.7%, British and Irish, 82.9%, French, German, Scandinavian, broadly Northwestern, Southern European, Spanish and Portuguese, broadly Southern European. And with the Southern European, assuming that, great grandmother, well, I guess half Bahamian, half Spanish, meaning that it'd be a second great grandparent who would be the full Spanish ancestor. And as we can see at the banner below, second great grandparent would be about 6.25%. What are we getting for Southern European? 6.3%. So we can't be sure that it's all coming from this great grandparent or second great grandparent, the mother or father of this great grandmother, but that seems to match up. So in that sense, that's all we have for the first one. And then here we have the second part with the indigenous of 1%. And that indigenous American 0.4, Nigerian 0.4. Yeah. So, and then here we go. Your recent ancestry in the Americas, Caribbean, New Providence, in the Bahamas, plus 6 other regions. So they're definitely picking up on it. And so their coloring often indicates the ethnicity admixture is connected to. So I believe that's, so here it's kind of two, it seems. It seems it's the Indigenous American, and then I guess it's also, it's the Indigenous American, and one of the I guess maybe it's kind of just all of this trace ancestry sort of, but it seems like it's that a mixture of these it's saying is tied to the Caribbean. And my guess is that it is tied to your ancestry in the Bahamas, and then part of that Bahamian ancestry I don't know the history of their, like I mentioned, but part of that is showing up in this European as well. So we're getting 6.3%. That's that Southern European, and it's very possible that even though we're expecting about 6.25% for a second great grandparent, the great grandmother, even though half Bahamian, well, half Bahamian is what? And like I said, I don't know the history, but half Bahamian could mean a large amount of Iberian or other Southern European, with some of that native and maybe even African ancestry there. So we're getting that mixture of this 0.4% indigenous, 0.4% Nigerian, 0.1% broadly Western, and then 0.1% Siberian. And then with the European, all very kind of mostly Northwestern European. So that would be my guess. And, you know, especially if you said, my mom also had trace native in her results as well. Well, test your father. How's his coming out? And even more with your mother's results, you just say trace native, but what about the Nigerian and the broadly West African and the Siberian? Is she getting any of that? Or is she getting kind of other mixtures of maybe African or something like that mixed in? Or, I mean, granted, Siberian's not really African, but yeah, just, you know, how much is her percentages, but then even more, if your dad's not getting any of that, that kind of gives you even more confidence with it. So yeah, I think that's good. Let's see here. Okay, that is. Just wanted to make sure I had the right. This question was answered in this live stream. And please do not ban me, Reddit. Please don't ban me, especially because this account is one I've had for years. Okay. Oh, we need to label it as reviewed too. Reviewed. All right, let's check chat. Check chat. Okay. Does 23andMe show the start and end positions of matching segments? They definitely do not anymore. I think they used to. I'm pretty sure I've gotten, basically that's the chromosome browser information. I'm pretty sure I had chromosome browser information, but I'm not 100% sure if I did from 23andMe. But either way, right now 23andMe is blocking so many of their tools. And if that was available, it's definitely not anymore. At least not right now. Okay, let's see. I did a DNA test with Nat Geo 2.0 in the past and got 56% Southwestern Asian, 32% Southeast Asian, 7% Mediterranean, 2% Oceanian, I'm guessing. But when I tested my mom using Ancestry, that's saying my mom is 100% South Asian. Well, one thing I can tell you is the Nat Geo 2.0 was super old school, and the admixture results have progressed greatly since then. And so, you know, I let me see. Yeah, 100% South Asian. Yeah. So, you know, I mean, but part of it is, you know, this is the thing with the admixtures that I say all the time is they're not really telling you much. They're just giving you a really, really blurry image of your ancestry. And for some people, that's more than enough because, you know, especially people with a mostly European ancestry, they can get a decently nuanced breakdown, or I guess a better way would say a granular breakdown. Whereas, like I've mentioned in earlier with the first question about the Asian ancestry, for a lot of these English speaking or Western world DNA tests, they don't have enough data and testers and information from studies to be able to give really high confidence granular breakdowns, and that's why they often have these broadly Southwest Asian or broadly South Asian or whatever. And so you can test at different companies, and some will claim they have better readings for certain population groups than others. But it's really a mixed bag, and it really comes down to the genetic matches and expanding your family tree and the paper trail that's really going to help you actually uncover your true ancestry. So feeling like a ripoff. I'm guessing you're saying feeling like a ripoff, or feeling like a ripe-off. We're gonna have a ripe-off, but yeah, if you're going in this expecting that these admixtures are gonna tell you a perfect breakdown of your ancestry and it's gonna be super granular and it's gonna be by country or whatever, it's just not gonna be that way. And I can almost guarantee if I had spoken to you beforehand about what you were expecting, I'd probably say, yeah, you're probably going to feel a little ripped off. I get cousins of mine who ask me all the time, hey, I'm planning to take a DNA test and what, blah, blah, blah. What should I expect from my readings? And especially from my cousins from my Sephardic side, because they're like, are they going to pick up on the Sephardic DNA? Are they going to tell there's a difference? Or it's like, well, no, they're not really going to be able to tell. And, some of the sites are going to lump it in with their Ashkenazi European Jewish reading. Some will have it, slightly falling into other categories, especially Western Asian or North African or Mediterranean, Iberian, Southern European, little percentages of stuff like that. But, it's just, you're not going to expect much that's going to tell you anything new. It's just going to tell you kind of a general what in a sense. And for people that come from a situation where they know nothing about their ancestry and they have no way to dig into their, results yet, and DNA testing their admixture is the only way they can tell, that's kind of where it really is the best use of the admixture. But otherwise it's, but yeah, Maven says the Nat Geo one has been completely discredited by now. I thought I wouldn't call it completely discredited. I would call it, out of date is a great way to put it, but there's a specific word I'm trying to think of that obsolete. It's become obsolete. It's very much like a lot of the GEDmatch admixture calculators, because a lot of them haven't been updated in years. Some that haven't been updated probably since like 2014, 2013, 2012. Like I remember the J-test one, the person who had made that put out a blog post years ago, like 3 years ago, maybe even longer than that, literally saying then that, hey, this calculator is obsolete. It hasn't been updated in a long time. Data shows that, things are a lot better with other stuff. Don't trust this, so it's, yeah. Yeah. And going along that, also thought there's no one with 100% ethnicity. The thing is these tests aren't truly saying you are 100% this ethnicity and that's it. What they're saying is 100% of the DNA that we tested correlates to the people that we are defining as this population group, or more specifically, this people. I mean, the testers, or what the testers or the study conducted to define this population group. So they look at a whole bunch of people that they say, okay, we are defining these people as this population group because they all say that they have this ancestry. And with different studies, it can vary. I know with some, I think I've heard that basically they're just looking for people where they say, okay, well, all 4 of my grandparents were born in China. Okay, we're going to test you and have you as a subject. So they get maybe 100 people that say all of their grandparents were born in China. They test them, and then they try to figure out what DNA is correlating and matching together that they can then use that to identify other people who will have Chinese ancestry or whatever it is. So, the thing is that even though there may not necessarily be 100% ethnicity, because the further you go back in time, the more likely you're going to find an ancestor who had some sort of other ancestry. And then, just think about it. People have been traveling in the world for thousands and thousands of years. And so pretty much everybody has all sorts of various ancestries. It's just that you have a majority of kind of one certain ancestry in your more recent ancestry. And as you get further and further back, you have so many ancestors. You have the pedigree collapse, which is, there's different ways to look at pedigree collapse. There's pedigree collapse in the sense of, that you have cousins marrying each other. So, there's fewer ancestors, but that concept also goes in that once you get far enough back in time, that becomes such a common thing that you end up having just certain people are your ancestors many, 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 many different ways. And you start to get back in time to a point where the amount of ancestors you should have in a generation is larger than the population that was alive. Well, I'm going down all sorts of rabbit holes on this stuff. So I see chat's got really quiet over the past 10 minutes of me talking. So, how far? We're at about an hour and 15 minutes. Okay. So I think I'll probably answer maybe one more question and then maybe do a couple more, stuff in chat from stuff. I do see this coming up. Why don't I have my heritage genetic groups? And that just might be that you just come from population groups that they have yet to be able to define for that system that they have, the genetic groups, the communities or whatever. So they're constantly rolling those out, and a lot of them too. So here's their page talking all about genetic groups and kind of how they kind of figured out. And they actually 23andMe. Oh, wait, no, this is my heritage, not 23andMe. They don't have a white paper on my heritage. This is kind of their white paper, I guess you could say. But I know that I think they have a list somewhere. Okay, so they have 2,114 genetic groups, and you can see where all the genetic groups that they've defined. So most of it's North and West European, then English, Scandinavian, Irish, Scottish, Welsh, and it goes down. And so then you can see, Inuit, Mongolian, Thai, and Cambodian, Somali, Central Asian, Ethiopian, all of these have however many breakdowns. So each one of these is, I believe, their the percentage population groups you'll get in the admixtures, but then it's showing how many of the genetic groups are tied to each of those. And this is December 2020. So I wonder if they updated it since. Oh, we can close that out. Let's see if we can see news. Okay, let's just go into my heritage blog. And what are we? Genetic groups. Yeah, I guess maybe they haven't updated genetic groups in a while. I guess sworn they have a page that lists all of them. We announced release of genetic groups. That's right. That was this first post that we looked at. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I don't know. I'm not going to spend too much time trying to find every single one that's available. But that looking into it, that could help you tell you. But yeah, I'm 25% Japanese, 75% European with Polish, British Isles, etc. Yeah, I mean, it could also be too, if you're just so mixed, I wouldn't be surprised that people with really high mixtures of ancestry may find that they're not getting genetic groups because it's very difficult to figure them out. But I don't know exactly. But that could be why. And then I do see, I think my heritage added up to 103% or 105%. I'm not sure how that can be, LOL. And I think that happens on a few sites because what they do is they just round stuff up. So, you might have, a couple that were, maybe it was 10.8 and 9.7 and whatever, and they just round up and round up and round up, and then it just adds up to more. I'm not sure if my heritage does that or not. But I've definitely seen multiple sites where it'll add up to more than 100%. Okay, let's jump to a question. I kind of want to find something that's like a genealogy one. We've got a recent one from 4 days ago. Mystery relatives. Let's see. This one's got a lot of play, but it's a DNA. All right. Last year I did a DNA test. Results show that I had a second cousin of some variation who I share 297 centimorgans with. That's a great match. However, no one can figure out how we relate. I'm currently 30 and from the UK. The cousin is in her 90s and from the USA. Okay, well, that can tell you a lot. Her 90s, so we know. Remember, we were talking about those generational whatevers. Well, does this person say how old? Yeah, I'm currently 30. This cousin's in their 90s, so we're looking at a 2-generation difference, most likely. So if we're looking at that shared centimorgan project again, 2-generation difference means we go up 2. Actually, let me go ahead and pull that up again so we can talk about it. So let's put in 297. And here's our self. We go up 2, and then we go over. And we've got a first cousin twice removed, or a half great aunt or uncle. Actually, no, I guess it'd be more half first cousin once removed, much more along the lines of that. But one thing that's great about the histograms, we can look and see, well, how many people are falling into that for here? So there's definitely a little bit of confidence, because if we open this up and it was like pointing down over here, that's real low confidence, but it's kind of like a medium low confidence that it might be a half great aunt or uncle. But if it's we're looking at most likely half first cousin once removed, first cousin twice removed. All right, let's go on. So I've been working with her daughter to try and find some answers, but the cousin never knew her biological father. Aha. And her mother kept all info about him secret and took it to the grave. All they know is that he was British. Through a process of elimination, I've managed to figure out they're probably related through my paternal great-grandma, but no one in my family knows anything about her. There's also very little documents relating to her, and no one knows who her parents were or how many siblings she had, etc. She's a complete mystery, which I have my paternal great-grandma is the same thing for me. So sometimes you just get these mysteries and it's years and years before you break through. And I've got one that I still haven't, but let's continue. I've tried to go through shared matches with this cousin, but turns out this British relative of mine had a lot of fun overseas. So most of the shared matches are also in the USA, and have no idea who this relative is either. He made sure his name never went on any birth records, and one child was put into an orphanage. I tried searching the orphanage, but turns out the orphanage mixed up the child's document with another child. The only other shared matches we have in the UK have not been online for an extremely long time. I've tried contacting them, but never have any luck. Does anyone have any advice on how to crack this mystery? I feel like I've tried everything at this point. Thanks in advance. Now, they say a lot of stuff that sounds really good, but then there's a lot of kind of questions to it as well. You know, they say, I've tried to go through shared matches with this cousin. Perfect. You look at shared matches and figure out who's in the cluster. But turns out this British relative of mine had a lot of fun overseas, so most of the shared matches are also in the USA, and have no idea who this relative is either. And that statement packs a lot, because you're saying this British relative, so, you know, are you assuming that the British relative who's the biological father of this cousin? And if so, how do you know that they're descendants of her as well? Because I mean, if that is the case, that this guy did go around and have a lot of kids, then they would be half siblings to this British relative. But otherwise, if you're just finding a lot of shared matches and they happen to be all over, and so you're presuming that it must be descendants, but they aren't half sibling, you know, there's a lot of things in here, I guess, that it's like, we need to clarify what exactly you're saying for me to give the best answer, I guess. But I do see there's a lot of posting down here, so I'm guessing some other people ask stuff, and we'll jump into that. So, yeah. So also saying he made sure his name never went on birth records. I think that's kind of a loaded statement when we don't know who this guy is. We don't know what he was doing. And if he was going around impregnating women, I have a lot of experience in finding women who had children out of wedlock who most likely knew the names of the men, or it seemed to possibly be, and they just never told their children the name. And the guy didn't know that they had kids, possibly, or maybe he didn't want to be on it. But it's just a statement of, how do you know? Because there could always be other stuff going on. And if you have this in your head, that can really change how you look at documents, assuming, oh, well, he tried not to be on this birth record, as opposed to maybe he just didn't know, or maybe it was something else. I don't know. And then one child was put into an orphanage. So once again, is this child in the orphanage a half sibling to this British cousin, or is it just another shared match? And I don't know. So the only other shared matches we have in the UK have not been online for an extremely long time. I've tried contacting them, but never have any luck, which in those cases, that's where you need to really learn how to do the technique of building family trees for people that have no family tree up and are living people. And that is a technique to learn in of itself, living people research, but there are ways to do it. So let's see what people say. Do you have any parents or their siblings or even grandparents or their siblings alive? Could they take a test? Just me and my parents. I already know it's a link through my paternal grandmother, but I have no grandparents left on that side. So I assume if it's me and my parents, they mean that it's through the father's also matching, which if that's the case, if the father's done the DNA test, you need to look at how much he's matching this cousin, because especially being that this cousin's of the older generation, your father should presumably match a lot more than you, possibly double or more. Okay, would this match be similar age to your paternal grandmother? This sounds like it could be a first cousin twice removed, i.e. a first cousin of your paternal grandmother. There's about a 20-year age gap between my grandma and the cousin in the U.S., which we're not always looking, you don't want to focus too much on that sort of generational stuff. You're just kind of getting the ideas. So they're going to be about around that same, generation. And the cousin was born in 1930. I've looked at my grandma's siblings and it can't be any of them. Well, of course it wouldn't be, because we're looking at a first cousin twice removed. So we wouldn't be looking at a sibling of your grandma. We would be looking at a, what are we looking at here? I guess we'd be looking at your grandma's parents' siblings' children. So yeah, I'm thinking possibly a sibling of my great grandma. So they seem to be stuck on this sibling idea. It's might not be a sibling of your or well, it might not be the actual sibling. It might be a descendant of the sibling. That's So, okay, who was born in 1892? But since no one knows if she had siblings or who her parents were, it's hard to work it out. You are right that it would be very hard to work out. Yes, I'm not sure what makes you think this is a sibling of your great grandma, though, as opposed to a first cousin of your grandma. A 20-year age gap is not that uncommon amongst first cousins. Centimorgans Planner said, so physical menu. We're going to give you a couple of upvotes for this. And then where do you test? They didn't say anything. Okay. Have you uploaded to more than one database, etc.? It might help in finding sharing matches. Lots of clustering matches via leads method, cross-referencing across Ancestry, all of that. Okay. I've uploaded to Ancestry and Tell Me Gen is not going to help. Upload elsewhere. Upload to MyHeritage. Upload to Family Tree DNA. Upload to GEDmatch. Upload to Genie.com. Until recently, I would have also said GenieNet, but they stopped doing that. But you need to cast your net as wide as possible for DNA matches, and Tell Me Gen does not give you those, as far as I remember. Like I said before, I don't follow these sites that aren't genealogically useful. And Tell Me Gen's one of those ones that I've looked into a few times, and every time I'm like, this does not have any genealogical use to it. At least I don't see it. So the UK relatives, okay. I'll definitely try uploading my data to other databases and see if anything pops up. I'll also see if I can find a way to see how I relate to other UK shared relatives, because they're a bit mysterious as well. The UK relatives haven't been online in so long that I'm unable to ask them questions about their ancestors, etc. I found most people who take the DNA test don't make a tree, so it's hard to figure out who their parents are to search it back in history. I'll give the other databases a try. And that's where you really need to learn how to do living people research to build trees of matches that don't have trees up. Are you always going to be able to do that for matches that don't have trees up? No. Sometimes you're just going to have a match that's just sitting there staring you blank in the face, teasing you that, hey, there's somebody out there that's got the information that could break through your brick wall, and they exist, but you can't contact them. And that is a killer feeling. Okay, so 297 centimorgans is a good range for second cousin, although we've got to remember that 2-generation likely gap. Maybe an unknown adoption. Yeah, okay. So some stuff to really talk about here, because there's a few other things to talk about. Number one is they say that it's just them and their parents. Well, if your parent has tested, that parent should match more to this cousin, and that's going to give you a way better idea of what's going on. So that's number one. Number two is that you do need to start working on identifying cousins throughout your different sides of the family. And so you do mention, let's see, what's the details on the, like you knew up to your grandmother, I think it was, or was it your great grandmother? Yeah, really paternal great grandmother. So so then that means that you should be able to build out the family tree down from your paternal great grandmother. So did your grandma, did your grandma, whoever this is, did she have siblings? So if it was your grandmother or grandfather, whoever through your paternal side, if they had siblings and those siblings have living descendants, get those living descendants to DNA test too, because the more people that you can get to DNA test, then you can build a what are the odds tree, and that's going to be super, super helpful in helping you figure out where this is falling in line with stuff. It sounds like you're kind of on the right path with a lot of this, but it also sounds like you're still kind of catching your bearings with it. And so, I'd say keep moving in terms of, looking at these matches, work to build the trees, especially of these matches that are good shared matches between you both. But more than anything, if your parents have tested, focus on your parents' DNA test with this, because it's always better to focus on the older generation than the younger. And so for your parents to have tested, I mean, that's great. And even better, if your paternal grandmother's alive and this is presumably the side that you think it's through, try to get her to test. Or if she does have siblings who are also alive, try to get them to test. The older the generation that tests, the more information you get. And especially if it's going to be a first cousin, you'll be able to get a really good idea of that, just because of, how things are. So like, let's say over here, okay, so we think it might be a first cousin twice removed, right? So that would be a 221 centimorgan match. Well, we also think that it could be a half first cousin once removed here. And so if it's the parents, we jump up to the parents, and then boom, we're getting a lot more. So if it is a first cousin twice removed here, that means it's going to be a first cousin once removed for the parents. And so then that's also going to be a half great uncle, basically. And so with that for the parents, then you are looking at a lot more. But let's say that you just happen to not have inherited as much, maybe, or share as much DNA from this line as this other person. Because remember, there is a range. So maybe they aren't a first cousin twice removed. Maybe they truly are a second cousin once removed, or maybe they even are a great great aunt or uncle and you just don't know it. Or a half great. I mean, it's doubtful that, but it's just having that older generation test. You're going to get way better idea and better results. Which hopefully that makes sense. Let me check what chat's saying. Wow, there's a lot of chats coming through as I was answering this one. Cool. So, so a lot of people kind of chatting with each other in the chat, which makes sense. That's why they call it chat. Maven says, this sounds like someone who needs a one-on-one or Discord help. Yeah, I would highly recommend that too. And that's actually a good place to mention that for anyone who is not familiar, I do offer one-on-one sessions with people. Right now, the only way to get those is by going to my Patreon page and getting a Patreon tier, which there's a few different tiers in my Patreon that have it. I may be offering it through other ways. I'm going to put my Patreon in chat. Excuse me. But as well, just a reminder too, the Discord that I have is quite an amazing and active Discord. And I think if you're on YouTube, there is a description link. And if I see another link put up, but that's a great place to get help. But yeah, it sounds like this person probably needs that. And I'm going to make note of our OP's username, Timid Wren, in case they are in chat. I don't know if they are, but let's see. Okay. Yeah, wondering if the British relative was military. That certainly makes some sense, although we are looking at this cousin was born in 1930. So if it's, an American father, it's certainly possible. I'm sure there were, well, I guess I don't know for sure. But, I'm sure it's possible that American soldiers were in the UK outside of World War II, but that story is much more common, I think, with World War I and World War II of, the soldiers are over there and then they impregnate a woman. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, I see Southeast Michigan Rail Fan is getting some help from people in the chat. And yeah, Southeast Michigan Rail Fan, if you haven't left yet, it looks like you just said bye. But if you're still here, definitely jump in the Discord. Check it out. I think you might be able to get a lot of help too. So let's see. WeGene is another inaccurate DNA company for Europeans anyways. Yeah, I mean, the thing with the test, the WeGene test and 23 Mafong and Gene Life, the Asian-based tests is they probably are less nuanced and less granular in their readings for European and other stuff. So, I mean, that's the thing with every site. And that's one of the reasons why I always talk about the precision and recall numbers and white papers is because each site is better in some ways and worse in others on each population group. So some population groups, some sites are way better at, other population groups, some sites are not as good at. And so some sites are better, like I talk about all the time with Eastern European. MyHeritage has a huge database of Eastern European and as well South American. But then if you really want a really granular breakdown for African ancestry or Northwestern European, then Living DNA offers the most granular breakdowns, but there is a question of the confidence with it. So, yeah. Have you ever done a GEDmatch tutorial, Jarrett? I've done some tutorials, I think, and I did tutorials in the past, a lot more of them, and then I started to get away from it because a big push that I was trying to go with the channel was to really bring in a much younger crowd and really create content that was much more appealing to that younger crowd and stuff like that. Not that I don't want to be appealing to non-young audience, but just kind of geared towards that. And I found that with tutorials, while they were great, especially evergreen content, they just didn't really hit and bring in the people. And I also felt that, you have a lot of great YouTube channels that do cover stuff like that. So like Family History Fanatics, so many amazing GEDmatch tutorials. Genealogy TV has a lot. I think, trying to think of Larry's channel. I can't remember. I think DNA Family Trees, maybe, is that it? But there's a lot of great tutorials on there. But I will say that I have been working with EJ Blum, who I mentioned earlier from Genetic Affairs, on creating a endogamous-based auto cluster. So there's a lot more stuff that you can change and manipulate with the auto cluster tool for this. And I am hoping to possibly create some sort of video about it. I don't know if it'll necessarily be a tutorial straight up, but yeah, so haven't done one yet, but if anyone is looking for those, definitely check out Family History Fanatics, Genealogy TV, and then probably find some other good ones too. Let's see. JRE asks, question, wondering where to find more on building a tree for a living mystery DNA match that is non-responsive. So there's a few techniques to this. I know I kept talking about techniques. One of the number one things is, first off, using the little bits of information you have. If you're in the unfortunate circumstance where all there is a initials and a very generic email, like, an email that so many people have had in different username styles, it can be really difficult to figure it out. If you've got, TS, and then it's, the email is tomsmith@gmail.com or tomsmith11779, stuff like that. It's like, okay, good luck. But for a lot of them, if you've got a name that's unique enough that you can possibly tie it to the email, you can, just basic Google, just, put in the email in Google along with the name. There's also websites like Been Verified or Spokio that are websites designed for finding information on living people. These are the websites that when you see those commercials that are like, do you want your personal information taken off the internet? We contact these sites and tell them to take it down for you. Been Verified, Spokio, these are the kind of sites they're talking about. So, you don't always get everything you need from those, but there's other tricks too. Facebook is a great place to look. All social media. I've done actually videos, and I think even when I used to write blog posts on sephardicgenealogy.blogspot.com, I think I even did one talking about finding my family on Facebook and the techniques I used. But then also usernames, and a great place for usernames. A lot of people don't realize Ancestry has a member directory search. So you can literally go under the search function. Let's see if I can pull it up for everybody so they can see. Make sure there's nothing on here that's I don't want people seeing. Okay, perfect. So if we go under search and member search, you can search by username. And if there's an email in there, I will put in the full email with the @whatever. Rarely do I find actual usernames like that, but I feel like I found some over the years. But then cut off the @whatever and just use the first part of the username. Then also you can use that email if you're looking in Been Verified in other places as well. You can put the names in here. So, if they have maybe a unique enough name, or sometimes you'll get people where the email isn't usable and they have a somewhat generic name, but there's a photo with the name. Well, sometimes they use that photo in a lot of places. And so you can put the name in here, and maybe you do have a list of 20 or 30 people, but then they've got that photo, you know who it is. So these are a lot of the different techniques that you can use to overcome the limitation of having a DNA match that has no tree and no other information. And for some sites, like if you're on 23andMe, although I don't know if they still have that stuff available, but 23andMe, MyHeritage, Family Tree DNA, there are other places they can put information. So, Family Tree DNA especially, they can put surnames and locations and things like that. And so if there are other pieces of information, use all of that as clues to help you in figuring this out. If there's a somewhat common name where you find hundreds of people with the same name, but then you see they have a location listed as, even just Michigan or something, well, that's going to narrow it down greatly for you. So there are a lot of ways to overcome that. Let's close that. Finally able to catch a live stream. Thank you very much for joining the live stream. I'm probably going to be ending it soon. I've been going for hour and 45 minutes. So I'll probably maybe I'll just keep going until the 2-hour mark, but I'll just keep chatting with my chat. Okay, so been doing paper research for decades. I tested and grandmother. Oh, so you tested your grandmother as a shot in the dark to find a second family of disappearing great-grandfather, only to have a mystery close relative result. Yeah, it's awesome to have that mystery close relative, because it's like, okay, now we got something to work on. But it is really difficult when they're not responding and it's difficult to find them. But one thing I should say too, with what I was talking about with finding them, if you do find them elsewhere, one thing I like to do is I like to check the profile of wherever we are matching to see if it says when was the last time they logged in. Because sometimes you'll look and see they haven't logged in over a year and they just don't realize you messaged them. And for some people, they may feel uncomfortable trying to do that, reach out to people on, outside of the DNA testing site. And, personally, I've done it so many times and found that often it, I'd say 80% of the time it works out when they respond. Granted, people respond maybe still, 25% of the time or whatever. But, when they do respond, most of the time it does work out. At the very least, when they do respond, even if they aren't interested or whatever, they may say, oh, that's me, but I'm sorry, just not interested. And then, I will say too, make sure to take snapshots of matches that are really important to you, because especially if you start contacting them like that, because it's not uncommon to do that. And then next thing you know, you go and look and they took their information down off of the website and you no longer have it. And then it's completely gone from you. So yeah. Family fanatics, no, family history fanatics. So yeah, I see Adam here put it in. I think family history fanatics, they are on hiatus. They haven't posted in 4 months. I'm sure they're taking a break. I mean, Andy and Devin have a big family that are constantly doing all sorts of stuff. They're wonderful, wonderful people. I'm hoping to see them at RootsTech in a few months, which people who don't know, RootsTech's coming up in Salt Lake City. I will be there. I'm giving 2 talks while I'm there. So definitely come out. And if you come out, you come watch me live. But even if they are on hiatus, they have a lot of amazing tutorials up, especially with GEDmatch, which I think was where I was recommending it. Any idea why some of my genetic matches do not match either my mom or my dad? This happens regularly, with the largest match being 52 centimorgans. Seems weird something like that would happen. Oh, seems weird that something like that would happen. Okay. Yeah, so there could be a few things going on. The number one thing is, if you come from an endogamous population, this is where it becomes really, really commonplace for stuff like this to happen. Just because with endogamy, you're dealing with a lot of issues. But what this would be is, we call it a false positive. And what it blah, blah, blah. And what just happens is that mostly it's just that there's errors in the DNA, and there's different places those errors can come up, which is causing the system to then misread your DNA. Now you do say, oh, I didn't mean to bring that down. There we go. Oh, wait, no. Where did you go? Here we go. And so what can happen is that they just have an error with reading it, and they just think that that's an actual match, but it isn't. In genetic genealogy, we break these down known as there's identical by descent, or IBD, meaning that the DNA that you share, that you are matching with somebody else, it's identical in that spot because you both descend from some shared ancestry. So identical by descent. And more specifically than shared ancestry, it's identical by descent in the sense of identical by descending from the same recent ancestors. Then there's identical, or there's IBS, so identical by state, which technically covers IBD as well. Basically, it just means because of the state of the DNA, it's identical, which when you share ancestry, well, that's also the state of the DNA. So you will hear some genetic genealogists actually say there's a third one, which is identical by chance, IBC. And it's just identical by the chance that your DNA had been misread in some sort of way. And it's not just on your end. It could be that your DNA is misread slightly, and then the match's DNA is misread slightly. And because of those misreadings on both sides, that then causes it to match. But in reality, neither of you should be matching at all. And then when your parents are tested, those matches aren't coming up. Now, the other question too is I'm assuming that, or the other thing to say is, I'm assuming that your mom and your dad and you are all in the same database, because if it's that you're in a different database than your mom and your dad, well, if the DNA match isn't also in that other database with your parents, they're definitely not going to match. But I'm assuming that that's not the case. I'm assuming that you are all in the same database. So that could be why that's happening. I think 52 centimorgans is pretty high for false positive matches. And then especially if you do have your parents testing, if it's a site that does phasing, that's something that you want to make sure that the test has done that. Like I think for 23andMe, they do phasing, but you have to actually link it together to have it phase. And what phasing means is that it's taking the DNA and deciphering what DNA are you getting from mom and what DNA are you getting from dad, because until you have your parents' test, the DNA tests, they can only guess at what's coming from mom and what's coming from dad. And even not calling it mom and dad, parent one and parent two, just, which is coming from which parent. And what can happen is each DNA spot, there's two alleles, two base, or there's two pair, or not two pairs. There's two bases, a base pair, as we say. So at each spot, there's, AA or TT or CT or AG or something like that. And so at each spot, one letter's coming from mom, one letter's coming from dad, but they don't know which one's which. So they can come up with segments where one spot is a letter from mom, and then the next spot's a letter from dad, and then the next spot's a letter from mom, and the next spot's a letter from dad. And so they come up with this fake segment that's a mixture of the DNA you've come up with from mom and dad. And then they try to match that to other people because they think that's the true segment. But then when you do the phasing, it goes, oh, wait, we put those together where this is actually from mom and this is actually from dad. And then they fill in the gaps with what should actually be coming from mom and dad, because now they can line it all up. And then it cuts out a lot of these false positives. So hopefully that's helpful. But yeah, that's one of those unfortunate things. And if you're coming from an endogamous population, which some typical ones, Jewish ancestry, French Canadian ancestry, Cajun and Creole ancestry, any sort of islander ancestry, but especially the Pacific Islanders are really known for hardcore endogamy, really high endogamy, like pages upon pages of 200 centimorgan and 300 centimorgan matches, and no way to figure out how they're related. Yeah. So, okay, let's continue. Okay, just to kind of keep going. Yeah. My heritage, I know their ethnicity isn't that great, but genetic matches should be more accurate, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. I thought my heritage has phasing. So you might want to look into it and see if they are one that you have to connect it, because it's phasing I talk about all the time, but it's just one of those things that it's so rarely done that it's like every time I go through to do it, it feels like it's changed since the last time I've done it for somebody. Okay. Yeah, I wish they at least posted an update, because I just don't know what happened. I used to be a member of their channel. Yeah, I really want to hear from them. I really hope to see them in Salt Lake City for Roots Tech, and I hope everything's okay. But yeah, at least they do have a lot of great videos up. Yeah. Donna Roberts says, my heritage fills in the missing info by basically guessing. And actually, I mean, a lot of these sites do that too. And oh my gosh, why can't I think of the there's literally a term that we use for this, and it's completely escaping my mind right now. But it's literally basically just doing that, of just where the system looks at your DNA and it says, okay, well, we see this match, this match, this match, this match, and this match, and this other stuff, it kind of isn't, but we're gonna make the presumption of what is supposed to be there based on what we've seen. Or I'm explaining this terribly. I don't know, but basically they do that where they're kind of filling in the gaps of, we see these DNA markers and these rows coming up, and based on everything we've seen, everyone that has that also has this other stuff. So we're going to then fill that in. And if anyone knows the term for that, it is like on the tip of my tongue right now, and I just cannot think of it. So I'll keep an eye out. Okay. Yeah, that's something to note. That DNA painter can be misleading when you have double relations. I have a few in my tree. Double relations add a lot to it. That's one of the reasons why endogamy is such a difficult thing to deal with genetic matches, is because endogamy is where you have a lot of double relations and a lot of pedigree collapse. It's just both are at varying levels, and that's why different population groups, the endogamy is different. So with Jewish endogamy, there is a decent amount of pedigree collapse, but that's much more in the past. What happens with a lot of the Jewish endogamy is the double relations happening. So a lot of people who are Jewish, it's that, the endogamy is really caused by the fact that they're related in like dozens of ways if you go back just 300-400 years ago. So for my Dutch Jewish ancestry, I do know that information, because we can actually trace those trees back. Whereas for most Ashkenazi Jewish and a lot of Jewish ancestry, they can't trace back, to the 1700s or 1600s or 1500s. But I sure can on my Dutch lines. And I've been able to find a lot of my Dutch cousins I'm related to in multiple ways, and we can prove it through the paper trail. And then through DNA, not only are related through our Dutch lines, but we do our DNA and we can see, oh yeah, well, we're definitely related through our Eastern European Ashkenazi lines too, because we're matching through our parents that have only Eastern European Ashkenazi. So it's like, everyone who's endogamous has a lot of those double relations. So DNA painting can become a difficult thing for all of that. And so there are techniques to overcome that, where you have someone with double relations and the double relation and it's decently close. And you can basically, what you end up having to do is you have to take that person and you have to put in the segments one at a time and deciphering which side that's coming from. And you need to do that by using your other matches, your shared matches. But then the real difficulty comes in where it's half identical regions versus full identical regions, meaning, we're talking about base pairs, right? 2 bases at each spot. Well, if you're cousins to someone through both your mom and your dad, you're going to have a lot of matching that are half identical regions, meaning you only match a segment from your mom or you only match a segment from your dad. But then there may be spots in your chromosomes where you're matching this cousin, but in that same spot on the chromosome through your mom's side and your dad's side, meaning it's a full identical region. So every base pair on that chromosome, instead of just one part of the base pair on one side, you're going to be matching. And that's where the real difficulty comes in deciphering the segments, because the way that the chromosome browsers give you this information is half identical regions and full identical regions are shown the same way. The only site that shows half identical regions and full identical regions separate, in a sense, is GEDmatch, doing a 1-to-1 comparison there. So yeah, DNA Painter certainly can be misleading when you get those double relations and all of that. Camo Jan just joined Reddit in your channel. Thank you very much. Great place to say. If you aren't on Reddit, definitely go to Reddit. I know I've only answered 2 questions today, and let's see. Do I have? Whoops. No. Okay, I need to get this back. I need to mark this. This question was reviewed in this live stream. And please don't ban me, Reddit. Please don't ban me, Reddit. Might have to start making Charlie and Matt and our newest moderator. Which, let's see, are they in here? Where's Yakin? I know she asked a question earlier. At some point she did. So I don't know. Retta, thank you very much. Imputation. So before, when I was talking about, thank you very much for the super chat for that. So let's go back up to the question. Yeah. MyHeritage fills in the missing info by basically guessing. Imputation is what I was talking about before, where the DNA looks at, okay, well, we have this marker here, then we have this marker further down, and then we have this other marker matching further down, and this marker further down. And when we see people who have all of those markers matching, we also see these other things in between that. So we're going to imputation. Thank you, Retta. What is in there. So that is what it is called. Thank you very much for the super chat to tell me what I couldn't think of. So yeah, so let's continue. Yeah, IBD and IBS, so inflammatory bowel disease and irritable bowel syndrome. Got it. Exactly. Hey, I gotta say, that's not as bad as when people go, wait, why is this gynecologist? What do we need a professional gynecologist to tell us about DNA results? It's like, no, I do something very different than gynecology. Okay, let's see. Paul B 4624. I have adopted daughter, bio dad adopted, bio mom's mom was adopted. I've built the tree, but not 100% sure of which parent is parent 1 versus parent 2. Worth it to run an X chromosome on my daughter? Well, with parent 1, parent 2, you're obviously testing through Ancestry. So to get that X chromosome DNA, you need to go on family tree DNA, and then MyHeritage doesn't give X chromosome. I think it's 23andMe, but I don't know if you can get much from it right now with how limited it is. So getting, uploading family tree DNA, definitely. I'm a bit confused though about everything that you're saying. I guess you're saying your adopted daughter's bio father was adopted, and your adopted daughter's bio mother's mom, so your adopted daughter's biological maternal grandmother was adopted. So a lot of adoption in the family. Built the trees, but not 100% of which parent. Now, the thing with the X chromosome, that's not going to help in terms of parent 1 versus parent 2. And the other thing to consider is the side view, as it's called, the parent 1 versus parent 2 thing. It's not always accurate for all population groups, most especially if she's coming from an endogamous population group. So mentioned before, endogamous population groups, but to jump into that a bit further, what endogamy is defined as is a population group marrying only other people within that same population group for a variety of reasons. Most of the time, those reasons have to do with location, meaning mostly island populations, not a lot of people going in and out. It's much harder. Two, cultural, which includes kind of religious things. So, that could be just a sense of, like, for Jewish people, they've become an endogamous population because for thousands of years, Jews have largely only married other Jews. Obviously, there has been other mixing in there over the centuries in different ways. But with those population groups, having these marriages only within those other population groups causes issues with the DNA. And so when you're looking at stuff like parent 1, parent 2, they can't figure it out because there's so much shared matching between both parents 1 and parent 2's side and their genetic matches. So if your adopted daughter is coming from those population groups, that very well could be why. So examples: Jewish populations, French, Canadians, island populations, very specifically Pacific Islander populations, even more, Creole and Cajun populations. And then, those are just some examples. There's a lot of different ones. So yeah, hopefully that was helpful. I do see where we are at 2 hours. So I'm going to kind of just go through the last little bit of this. Probably not going to really answer any more questions for today, but just kind of see what chat has to say. Yeah, Katie Gray, I have a lot of pedigree collapse in my tree and people related to both sides of my family. It makes things difficult. Very, very difficult. Very difficult. Okay. Bingo. Endogamy understood. I personally have endogamy. Dona Schwaben. Not sure what do you mean by that? What is Dona Schwaben? I don't even know if I pronounced that correctly. And I'm going out of focus. Hey, camera, I'm over here. There you go. Weird. Yeah, Daniel got a ton of endogamy and pedigree collapse. Yeah. So, it's a region in Germany. Okay. Yeah, I'm okay with my European geography, but once you start getting down into specific regions, it's a lot harder. Like I can pick out like Alsace-Lorraine areas, and like northern Schleswig-Holstein region and all that. But yeah, although I guess Alsace-Lorraine I guess is more French. Although I guess that depends on what year you're talking about, right? Can you have endogamy with pedigree collapse and not have Jewish? Not 100% sure what you're asking there exactly. I mean, you can have endogamy with pedigree collapse and not be Jewish. Endogamy is defined as the people only within one population group marrying other people within that population group. But in terms of DNA, when we say endogamy, in a sense, what we're referencing is the fact that we're looking at a population group that's going to have a lot of pedigree collapse and or a lot of double relations. Like I said, in my experience, every population group that is endogamous, that endogamy is slightly varied in terms of whether it's more pedigree collapse, more double relations, or maybe even amount of both, as well as how recent all of that is. So a lot of times when we talk about endogamy and things, we'll also talk about founding population groups. So a great example is French Canadians are an endogamous group, but they're kind of light endogamy, as I like to think. Number one, because they actually have good records, so you can build the trees, but also the endogamy is kind of not quite as intense in how it makes genetic matches skewed in their results, the results that you get. Whereas the Cajun and Creole populations have a founding population from the French Canadian group. Basically, a part of that French Canadian group then came down and was pushed to those areas. So you're taking a founding population from an already endogamous group, putting them in another locale, and then they themselves were largely endogamous. So when you deal with French Canadian endogamy, not quite, kind of on the lower end of the scale. Jewish endogamy gets a little bit higher up on the scale. I find Jewish endogamy, you get a lot of those double relations. With French Canadians, it's a lot of the pedigree collapse, I find. And you do get the double relations as well. But with the Jewish, it seems that it's a lot more on the double relations, and even more, not even double relations, it'd be better to call it multiple relations, and a lighter pedigree collapse. But then when you look at the Cajun and Creole, you're getting high amounts of both. High pedigree collapse, high amounts of double relations and multiple relations. And so when you look at someone with Cajun and Creole ancestry, their endogamy, their matches, you have a lot of 200 centimorgan matches. You have a lot of high 100 centimorgan matches. Your segments are going to be higher than you would expect for other endogamous populations, because segments are a good technique to answer those questions. And then when you talk about the highest of the high in terms of endogamy and affecting DNA testing, that's where you get into the Pacific Islanders, which are I've seen a few Pacific Islander DNA test results, and the matches are crazy. Some of them aren't as bad as others, but some of them, it's like lists upon lists of 300 centimorgans and high 200 centimorgans and things like that. Okay. Yeah, what is pedigree collapse again? Pedigree collapse is just the idea of cousins marrying cousins, meaning that you have fewer ancestors than you should in that generation. So a easy example to think of that is when first cousins marry first cousins. Well, they share a pair of grandparents. So technically you have 4 grandparents, and then you have 8 great-grandparents. Well, if you have first cousins marrying each other, their children will technically only have 6 great-grandparents instead of the 8 great-grandparents, because one set of those great-grandparents are on the mom's side and the dad's side. So it's pedigree collapse in the sense that, yeah, they technically have 8 ancestors, but 2 of those ancestors repeated. So the pedigree, instead of going out like this, the pedigree collapsed in, because we're going 6 instead. So that's kind of the idea. So whenever you see pedigree collapse charts, especially in terms of the idea of pedigree collapse, where the concept of pedigree collapse also defines the idea of when you go far enough back in time, you're going to reach a time where there are more ancestors you should have in that generation than people that are alive, because your ancestors doubles each generation. 8 great-grandparents, 16 second great, 32, 64, 128, so on and so forth, all until you get, millions, and there weren't millions of people living at that time, so yeah. Okay, I think with that, we're going to go ahead and end the stream. So I was actually kind of thinking I would do a little bit lighter of a stream, not as long today. And then, of course, every time I think that, ends up doing a 2-hour stream. But as always, had a lot of fun. Didn't have anybody guess on the map behind me today, although I guess you didn't get as much. You don't really see as much, but maybe that is a hint into itself. But we'll just use the map for the next one. since no one guessed it. But once again, thank you everybody for joining. If you have not voted on the poll for Friday's stream on who we're going to build the family tree for, do that, because you all get to decide who's it going to be out of those 4. As well, I'm looking for more suggestions on future streams to put in polls and all of that too as well. So looking for that. If you haven't joined Reddit, Discord, or followed me on Twitch, Facebook, or all those places, be sure to go check that out. Also, definitely give this a like, subscribe, follow, all the stuff that you can think of. Greatly appreciate it. We will be doing next stream Friday, aiming for 2:00 in the afternoon, but I'm kind of testing out different times and seeing how I feel on those days to get an idea. But then every Tuesday, I think we'll be aiming to do one of these Reddit question and answer ones. So greatly appreciate all of you. Have a wonderful rest of your day, or I guess for a lot of those in Europe, have a wonderful rest of your night. And for all of those in Australia or New Zealand, or if anyone's watching me in Asia, I guess good morning. So I will see you all on the next stream. Thank you very much.